G'day you mob, Pete here, and this is another episode of Aussie English, the number one place for anyone and everyone wanting to learn Australian English. So today I have a Goss episode for you where I sit down with my old man, my father, Ian Smisson, and we talk about the week's news, whether locally down under here in Australia or non-locally overseas in other parts of the world. Okay, and we sometimes also talk about whatever comes to mind, right? If we can think of something interesting to share with you guys related to us or Australia, we also talk about that in the Goss. So these episodes are specifically designed to try and give you content about many different topics where we're obviously speaking in English and there are multiple people having a natural and spontaneous conversation in English. So it is particularly good to improve your listening skills. In order to complement that though, I really recommend that you join the podcast membership or the academy membership at aussieenglish.com.au, where you will get access to the full transcripts of these episodes, the PDFs, the downloads, and you can also use the online PDF reader to read and listen at the same time. Okay, so if you really want to improve your listening skills fast, get the transcript, listen and read at the same time, keep practicing, and that is the quickest way to level up your English. Anyway, I've been rabbiting on a bit. I've been talking a bit. Let's just get into this episode, guys. Smack the bird, and let's get into it. Yeah, so Dad, what's going on? Welcome to this episode of The Goss.
Hey, Pete. Yeah, good. Skin Cancer City at the moment. Well, potential Skin Cancer City.
Dad's been under the knife.
I have been under the knife and I've been under the liquid nitrogen. So, last week I had 4 little spots burnt off with liquid nitrogen that were, becoming irritating. And then got the annual sort of, my birthday's the end of September. So September, October are usually these sort of annual health checkups. And so, doctor, this time we decided that we'd go through the prostate cancer one. So, firstly, go and get your prostate levels checked. Mine had gone up from 2 years ago to last year. This is just a blood test for an indicator for prostate cancer.
So you didn't get the pleasurable experience of having a stranger's thumb up your ass?
No, not this time. I had that in the past and everything was okay. But last year my PSA level went up. And so, doctor said, well, we'll check it again after 6 months. So I checked it and it had gone down again. So, yay, good news. But so then we decided, well, if we're going to do that, we might as well do the full body check for skin cancers, having burnt a few off.
How long does that take? That must take ages.
Look, it was just anything that was obvious. It wasn't stripped down and we'll do everything. But it was more because I got lots of spots and bits and pieces.
Dad's got freckles.
My Scottish suntan, I call the join the dots suntan. The longer you stay out in the sun, the more you've got. And so there are a few that I was concerned about, and obviously I've got spots on my back, and I don't get to see those. So, and he found one on my back, and I had one on my chest and one on my shoulder, and there was another one on my other part of the shoulder. So we carved all those off yesterday. So I'm sitting here at the moment with various patches, and no, I can't pull that up because you won't be able to see it. But with just taking small scraping and getting them biopsied. So it may turn out that none of them is skin cancer, but more than one might be. And I've certainly had a few taken off in the past. And this is one of these challenges of I think I joked with you yesterday, text messaging that growing up in the 60s with a mother whose version of sun safe was make sure you've got a suntan before Christmas. So.
I wonder if that does make sense to some degree if you get the suntan during winter, although maybe it's difficult to get.
You can't. That's the point.
Because the UV
but it was
is a lot lower.
As soon as spring came out, that it was always mum would be out sunbaking in October, November because she thought that if you've got a suntan, you can't get sunburned.
Well, you probably won't get
you're missing
sunburned,
the point that a suntan is sunburn.
Well, or the getting the tan, in the process of getting the tan is actually exposing you to eventually having skin cancer as much as getting sunburnt or not.
As much as getting badly sunburned. Yeah, exactly. So, mind you, I have had the gagged about When I had first had a couple of skin cancers cut off, and the doctor said, "Oh, you really need to, be wearing shirts and hats and sunscreen and everything else." And I said, "Well, I do all of that now, but let's be frank. if I go outside now and get skin cancer somewhere, get a mutation in my cells because of exposure to the sun now,
yeah.
I'm not going to die of that."
That'll
I'm going to
come
die of plenty
years.
other things that have happened to me in the past.
Oh, that's it. It is crazy. I wonder why it takes so long. I would like to know more about skin cancer and why it takes so long for that mutation to propagate and turn into cancer. Like if it's there and it's just sitting there waiting for that, decades
I think
and decades.
There are, without giving as a non-expert, a lesson on skin cancer. There's a whole variety of different sorts of skin cancer, and some of them will be there for decades. But their replication rate is so low that it's never going to be a problem. And the type of cancer that they are means that they don't metastasize. In other words, they don't go out to other parts of your body. But then there are some that do, and some that grow much more quickly. And obviously, melanoma being the obvious, the obvious one of those, that it grows quickly and it'll metastasize quickly. So if you find something, then you get rid of it as quickly as you can. So that's what we've been doing for the last day. So I'm now sitting around, and of course I've got stitches in various places. And doctor said, "Oh, just don't do anything strenuous and don't stretch.
Don't do any star jumps."
There's not much that you can do that doesn't stretch your back or your chest or your shoulders. So, fortunately, I can sit here and talk to you without doing too much.
Yeah, far out. Was there something that people were aware of back in your day when you were younger?
No.
At least, whether or not necessarily aware of the fact that exposing themselves to the sun at a young age would give them a higher chance of getting skin cancer at a later age, but were they aware of cancer as much as they are today?
Oh, people were aware of cancer generically because, obviously people were still getting, lung cancer. In fact, lung cancer was, much more prevalent when I was a child and a teenager than it is now, because far fewer people smoke and have done for decades. So, the number of people getting smoking-related lung cancer has decreased because the number of people smoking has decreased. But, both my parents died of cancer, and, my father certainly was lung cancer. My mother's cancer, by the time we found it, wasn't lung cancer, but there was a spot on her lung, which was probably or possibly the primary cancer. And people had breast cancer and, stomach cancer and colon cancer, and they were well known, but people didn't talk about it. Cancer was one of those things that was almost like a sexually transmitted disease that you didn't talk about. "Oh, I've got cancer, I'm going off to get it checked," or whatever. Now everybody talks about it, and rightly so, because part of the messaging around cancer is keep getting checked. The early detection is the best way of yes, prevention in some cases, but there's plenty of cancers that you simply can't prevent. Nobody's worked out yet how to prevent breast cancer or prostate cancer, two of the biggest killers. And so, the messaging now is all around making it obvious. When somebody's got it, they'll come on, particularly celebrities, "Hey, I got prostate cancer. Go out and get checked." So
was it a taboo though? Why didn't they talk about it? Or was
I don't know. I think it was just fear as much as anything else. I don't think we understood as, certainly as a child I didn't, but, as a teenager and as a young adult when I was studying biology, I certainly knew what cancer was, what caused it, and how it got created and so on. But I think the general population, it was almost like just don't talk about it and go away. And, sort of many people ended up dying of cancers that would have been treatable if they'd caught them earlier because they just didn't want to talk about it. And it was fear, I had a friend who, a school friend, one of my closest friends, died of leukemia in his teens. And we all knew people who had had cancer, and everybody thought, "Oh, cancer means you're going to lose your hair and everything." You didn't think that it was actually the therapy that was causing that. And so I don't want that to happen, particularly as a kid. I don't want to lose my hair. I don't want to be sick all the time. And so you just didn't talk about it. It's sort of weird, but
it happens even today, right? I mean, one of Kel's great aunts recently got diagnosed with breast cancer on both sides.
Yeah.
And it came out that she'd been aware of these issues, lumps, and I think one of them was like an open wound on her breast, and she just had it for years and was like, nah, didn't want to talk about it. And you're like,
no,
what?
It's that fear of that. It's that fear of diagnosis is worse than the fear of dying, and that's real for many people. Is this the death sentence is worse than just dying?
Well, and that's one of those things, right? You kind of like, if you're going to die, do you want to know exactly when and how, or do you want it to just be a surprise? And you're just like, oh, it's over.
Exactly.
I think most people would probably opt for the second, you would imagine, where it's like,
but whereas if there was a universal test, I can go and get a blood test once a year and it'll tell me, am I going to get any cancer in the next 10 years?
Yeah.
Everybody would have it.
Yeah.
But the fact that there isn't, there are specific tests. We talked about, prostate cancer before, specific tests for prostate cancer. There are specific tests for various forms of cancer, but there are as many forms of cancer that there is no test for yet. Or they're very expensive to do, and so they don't just become universal things. It's a weird one.
It is strange though, right? Like, I remember getting a COVID test a few times. I probably had 3 or 4 of them by now, but I remember the first time feeling like, if it comes back positive, I'm going to feel dirty. I'm going to feel like I've been, diagnosed with HIV/AIDS or something, it's this, or a sexually transmitted disease where you have this sudden like, ugh, because it's seen as such a negative thing in the, cultural space, that it was funny waiting for that result to come back. Even though something like COVID, where it's very unlikely to ever kill me, it's still like, I don't like waiting and having to see if it comes back.
Yes.
And the same with any time I've had blood tests where they come back and tell you whether or not you've got HIV or any of these other sexually transmitted diseases, you're always like, oh my God, they're going to tell me I've got AIDS. They're going to tell me I've got AIDS. You have all these like voices in your head saying, the worst is going to come out.
Yeah, you're right. And part of that is just your one's own personality and fears. But the second part is just the process. Mm-hmm. It's not like you go, well, we'll just quickly have if you go and have an X-ray or an MRI or a CAT scan or something, within minutes if there is an issue, assuming that there is a radiologist who can go and examine the scan and talk to you about it. But when you're talking about blood tests and pathology having to deal with it, and then when my blood test for the PSA, the prostate agent, you go and have the blood test, you don't think about it, and then 4 or 5 days later you ring the doctor and the doctor's not there, and the receptionist just says, oh, yeah, the doctor wants to talk to you about this. Can we make an appointment?
You're like, oh, Jesus.
You go, uh-oh. You can't just tell me there's not a problem?
Yeah. That's it. Can I just go on my way?
You wait another 3 or 4 days. Now, if it was urgent, if you're going to drop dead tomorrow, they'll come there. They'll drag you in there. But there's this thing of lying awake the night before going, am I going to get told that I've got prostate cancer? What's going on here? And so there is an element of that fear, but it's this, particularly in men, there's this thing of we're invulnerable and we're bulletproof, and so we don't need to go and get tested for various things, and which is why things like sorry for bouncing around, but if we live long enough as men, we're all going to die of prostate cancer. There is nothing more certain. Most of us die of something else before we get there, but it's just one of those things that you just need to, once you get to your 50s and so on, you just need to keep getting checked.
Just have your prostate removed.
Well, there is that. And look, plenty of people have that, particularly if there are genetic elements to them. People, how many women around the world have had breasts removed?
Well, Angelina Jolie did that, didn't she?
Yeah, because she came out and, her mother, I think it was, died of breast cancer, and she came out and went, got genetically tested. She had the gene for, and not all breast cancer is genetic, but and she had it, so she just had her breasts removed.
I had
it's
a friend
one of those
who found that
prophylactic
recently.
things.
She had BRCA1 gene, I think, and just found out she had breast cancer, and she's only 33. So had double mastectomy. I was like, fuck! I just can't imagine what my poor friend was going through, having to deal with that. Exactly. But she took it like a boss. But it is one of these interesting things where you're like, the good news is at least, having both breasts removed isn't going to, it's not going to hinder your health, I don't think, right? Like it's going to potentially impinge upon what it is to be a woman. I'm sure there are massive issues there.
There's a whole psychosocial thing that goes around with, breasts being such a, well, firstly, you're never going to breastfeed a child.
Yeah.
So there's that element. But then breasts are such a feminine, objectively feminine thing that losing part of your femininity must be, I can't fathom it because there is no equivalent in men.
No, well, I've only met one guy. I remember doing jiu-jitsu and getting changed one time and being like, "Hey, mate, where's your other nipple?" Like,
Yeah.
you've just got a line there. And I remember him being, I mean, I wasn't that blunt, but finding out that he'd had breast cancer himself. And
there's breast cancer is a
just,
thing in men as well. It's just nowhere near as prevalent because we don't have estrogen, or nowhere near as much.
No, but we have the same tissue that it's formed in. But
exactly.
Yeah, I remember that, and there was just no stigma attached to it. There's no, he's just like, yeah, I just got to cut out. Didn't care.
Yeah.
It's just
well, exactly.
I was like, it is. So it is very different for men, obviously, than it is for women. But anything else to say, I guess, on this topic?
No, not really. I think we're done. It's one of those ones where, it's not the most pleasant subject to be talking about, but it's worth talking about because it's part of our society. Whenever they having worked for a long time in education and in biological education in particular, you hear all the time in the press, "Oh, we're going to cure cancer." No, we're not. We're never going to cure cancer because we will never be able to prevent environmentally induced mutations in our DNA. We're going to be able to treat cancer extremely well. And every little step along the way does that. And we will find treatments for cancers that are going to be preventative as well. We might be able to prevent it, but we're not going to cure the underlying cause, which is our DNA is structurally unsound in its replication process, and things go wrong all the time. And some of those turn into cancer. So.
Well, it's almost a miracle that we grow into fully functioning human beings that live as long as, say, my grandparents, who are, 91, 94?
91 and 89, yeah.
Yeah, and you just like...
next week.
You're like, this person, this human being, this biological organism has been on this earth, close to 100 years now, and has been able to sustain itself with no catastrophic... Injury.
Our cell repair mechanisms are quite incredible.
And imagine how many trillion cells in that person's body are having to replicate perfectly every single, or near perfectly every single time.
The fact is that they don't replicate perfectly, but we have such good repair mechanisms that our body gets rid of the duds most of the time.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and that's the issue with cancer. A lot of the time, when we speak about it, we use just a single term, but there are so many different forms of it that are caused by so many different things, like UV radiation, viruses, in the case, I think, of cervical cancer, which they've created a vaccine
for. The human papillomavirus.
And so the treatments and the preventions of a lot of them are so different that there is no sort of blanket, this is what we're going to do.
There is no blanket cure,
It will be interesting to see what happens in the space of... what is currently science fiction, but you can imagine that in a few hundred years, if not thousands of years, assuming we're still here and not fighting with sticks and stones, that we will have nanites that we can use medically to do certain things in the body. And I can't fathom the kinds of treatments they're going to have, even for probably Noah and Noah's children, my son and his children, that they didn't have for you and I, right? Like, I don't know how old the X-ray is, but it can't be that much older than my grandfather, right? Like,
it's about that age.
Yeah. And so you're like, before that, they had no way of inspecting your bones internally without opening you up, right?
Exactly.
And today it seems like such a trivial thing. You're like, well, you can just get an X-ray. So it always blows my mind to think about what are the kinds of things that will just be modern day things that you just take for granted medically. Like, what's the name of the woman at the moment who's like, I think she was the first self-made billionaire in Silicon Valley, and she's going to jail for fraud.
Don't know. No.
Hold on.
I missed that story.
Here we go. I'll find it. Some of you guys will know it. Her name's Elizabeth Holmes. So it's a crazy story. So this is from Theranos, the company, and she's getting done for huge fraud. Effectively, I think she went to Stanford and she dropped out at 19 years old and created this company, Theranos, where the goal would be to take a single drop of blood from people and be able to run hundreds of different tests on that thing, on that drop of blood. And the problem is that she was creating these machines to do it, and it came out later that the results were falsified effectively. So
great.
It was impossible because they were diluting the blood drop down in order to run these tests on these different things for real individuals in the real world and then giving them incorrect results for their medical issues. So she's the world's first self-made female billionaire, faces 20 years in jail for fraud. But that's not the point. The point is that it was a really interesting idea, and you wonder what's going to be possible in the future when we have machines that you can imagine that eventually we'll get to a point where we'll have the technology to be able to just take a single drop of blood, or for you to wear something as trivial as, say, like a wedding ring that can sample your sweat or a little bit of blood or prick you or whatever on a daily basis and get your metrics, and so I can't imagine... I can imagine that's going to happen in Noah's lifetime, that there'll be some kind of, insulin blood test thing that can test for a shitload of problems that are common day at the moment, and they'll be dealt with. So, but yeah, go and look into this thing if you guys are interested in economics and fraud, lies. She seems like a total psychopath, this woman, Elizabeth Holmes, and they talk to her old teachers from Stanford, and they're just like, yeah, she was off the planet. But she ended up mimicking, what's the guy's name? Steve Jobs from Apple. Right. She started wearing turtlenecks and she dropped her voice, made it really low and speaking the same way. And everyone's just like, you are a Fruit Loop. So go suss it out. Suss it out. Anyway, that's probably enough for this episode, guys. We'll see you in the next one.
All right. Hopefully I'm here next week.
Alrighty, you mob. Thank you so much for listening to or watching this episode of The Goss. If you would like to watch the video, if you're currently listening to it and not watching it, you can do so on the Aussie English channel on YouTube. You'll be able to subscribe to that. Just search Aussie English on YouTube. And if you're watching this and not listening to it, you can check this episode out also on the Aussie English podcast, which you can find via my free Aussie English podcast application on both Android and iPhone. You can download that for free, or you can find it via any other good podcast app that you've got on your phone. Spotify, podcasts from iTunes, Stitcher, whatever it is. I'm your host, Pete. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a ripper of a day, and I will see you next time. Peace!